Diving into the murky depths of obscure and removed Terraria content, I sunk down into the deepest and darkest trench, where there I came across a long forgotten sprite sheet. These items were originally made as fan content by RMC141, but when Redigit encountered them, he decided to, in some form, implement them in the then upcoming 1.2 update. Though Aaron later left the team in 2014 because, according to him, there was not anything else he needed to do.
Well, my work is done here.
What do you mean your work is done? You didn't do anything.
Didn't I?
Anyway, in this video, I'm just going to be discussing what I think these sprites were intended to be, what they evolved into, and what my overall opinions of them are. Now the first item we have here is a wooden flail. Now it shares this grey area on the grip with the boomerang, so it probably would have been found inside of wooden chests. Now there definitely could be more loot inside of wooden chests, but personally I prefer the mace we have now in the current version as the yellow sustainable flail. Moving down we have a wooden staff. Now adding early pre-hard mode magic weapons was definitely a good idea by Am here. After all, prior to 1.2, the first magic weapons you could obtain were the water bolt and the vial form. The one of sparkling fills the tier of this item presently, though I'm guessing that this weapon was probably crafted, being it shares its texture with the gem staffs. Now the gem staffs, of course, were just straight up added to the game, but I think the gem colors match the metals much better currently. Something to note also is that the iron tier staff is absent from the actual game. This is due to the ratio of ores to gems after the addition of the alternate ores, so clearly there were no plans for alternate ores here. I have to say though, personally, I just don't like the alternate ores. They're simply objectively better counterparts to the originals, whilst logically most of them would be much less effective. I mean, who the hell makes an ammo out of lead? Now in the green group, the first item we have is a jungle pickaxe. Now this is an item that simply does not need to exist in any capacity. If it's equal to or greater than a demonite pickaxe in power, then it might break the game a little bit. And if it's worse, then it's just completely useless. Moving on, we have this entire bow section here. Now this meteorite bow, aka a recolored molten fury with prongs, doesn't exactly fit the retro sci-fi theme of meteorite, but dungeon bow here makes the most sense in terms of progression, being that this graph places dungeon before the jungle order, and there's also a very large gap between the demonite bow and molten fury. Interestingly, there's also currently 2 melee weapons and 2 magic weapons, but only 1 ranged weapon in the dungeon loot table, so it would make sense to have a bow to balance out, and give you an extra item to then promptly replace with an underwater weapon. I mean, you do in fact get shadow keys in the dungeon. Now thematically, a jungle bow just makes sense. We have the bee's knees now, but I think this item is much cooler than it. And then finally, we have this bow counterpart to the Knight's Edge. Now I can definitely understand why this would exist in terms of balancing, seeing that the Molten Fury is pretty trash as a final easy mode bow, and the Hellwing bow wasn't added until 1.3, but you really just don't need any other ultimate combination variants for different weapon types. It just takes away from the uniqueness of the Knight's Edge. I mean, it's the pinnacle of pre-hard mode weaponry, and well, it's a sword, and sword's a sword, just the embodiment of fantasy, so it really just fits. If it was contained in Shadow Chest, however, I would be perfectly fine with it. Then moving on to the non-consumable prone melee weapon tier, starting with the meteorite death frisbee. I mean, it's quite cool to look at. Isn't necessary. Maybe it could have
bounce on your boy's dick.
Maybe it could have even tracked enemies. I guess out of all these new meteorite items, this one fits the most with the space theme. It is kind of cool, and there's probably too big a gap between the boomerangs, so I could imagine it existing. Next up, Dungeon Boomerang. You know, it shares a lot of similarities with the Shroomerang, such as having no reason to exist. Wow, and here we have it, the Knight's Boomerang, a combination of all previous boomerangs. Why would this exist? I'm guessing it was half a joke. I mean, finally we do have a Trimarine now, which, as you know, is also retarded.
Fuma Shuriken, Kage Fusa.
The fucking Knight's machine gun. And then moving down here, we have the spear row. Now, beginning with the meteorite spear, again, following the trend, doesn't really fit the meteorite theme. The dungeon spear, I mean, there are already 2 dungeon melee weapons, and again, shadow chests. This jungle spear and hell spear especially look really cool. But the hell spear is even more redundant than the dungeon one. I mean, there definitely needed to be another spear or 2 in pre-hard mode. Back in the day, your only options before were the dark lance, the trident, and the spear. Even now, the rotted fork is Crimson exclusive, and still has a very large gap between it and the dark lance. In current Terraria build, I'd probably just have the corrupt spear as a counterpart to the rotted fork and meatball. Flails. Meteorite flail. Necessary. No. Does it fit the theme? Not really. Jungle flail, I mean, the replacement of a blue moon with a sun fury is already so quick. The knight's flail. The knight's flail.
Edging, sometimes also referred to as gooning or surfing, is a sexual technique whereby
Finally, for these goddamn Knight's Edge equivalents of everything, we have the Knight's armor. Now looking at this, I simply just ask why. I mean, I imagine it would have either given a base percent or damage type increase, maybe mana buffs as well. That, or it would have been class specific, presumably melee. I mean, the late pre-hard mode armor is all just completely fine. What was with his obsession with the shadow tier of everything, even when it made no damn sense? Yes, it looks cool. Most of these weapons look cool. Basically all of them look cool. But they weren't added for a reason. Also, another thing that I just thought I'd note is that all these shadow or knight's tier items that weren't added to the game have these green highlights on them.
Hello?
Hey, hi, how are you today?
I'm okay. How can I help you?
You know, I couldn't sleep at all last night.
Why?
Sneezing. I have this rash. Do you see how red my face is?
A little bit.
The problem is your house is painted green.
Yeah.
I'm allergic to grass. You know that because I've already told you when you moved in. Remember?
Vaguely.
Remember, I told you not to paint your house green. Please paint it a different color. I can't stand it. Every time... Don't say hell.
While the Knight's Edge and the Darklands don't have any green on them. Though interestingly enough, the True Knight's Edge does in fact have green on it. So I guess in some capacity this aesthetic choice was carried through. And then finally for the green group we have this jungle arrow. Now I think it's safe to assume that this inflicted the poison debuff. I mean this could definitely be in the game. I guess it sort of already is with the poison dart. Beginning in the early hard mode tier, we have the Hallowed Axe. It looks sick, but the Drax is a drill axe, and being that there were no hammers or axes shown for the other early hard mode wars here, what was the intended purpose of this item? Then next we have the
Uzi 9mm.
Now this was added in 1.2, I mean, currently it's obtained from killing enemies in hard mode jungle. Now, was it supposed to be attained there originally? I really can't say. I mean, prior to 1.2, there were very few weapon or armor pieces that were even dropped from enemies. I mean, the only ones I can think of were Adamantite brick. Adamantite brick. We originally did get the adamantite columns and beams in 1.2. But I find it funny there were just no adamantite bricks. Like, there's cobalt bricks, there's mithril bricks. I guess there's no iron bricks, but like, why are there no adamantite bricks? Did someone just forget? Or was it deemed so minor that the devs just didn't think anyone would notice if it was absent? And then finally, for this yellow section, we have these potions. Now, none of these were in fact added to the game, at least in appearance, but they do bear some resemblance to later potions, which I'll show you. But I find it interesting that 3 of them share the color palettes with the souls of Sight, Might, and Fright. But that's about all I can say. Now this red group is the entire reason I made this video, and everything prior to this point was just filler. This section depicts the kind of progression which, while bearing resemblance in many ways to what we got in the actual game, is overall very different. We also started looking at items by color now as opposed to row. Now starting with this column, which just by looking at it we can tell is what ended up becoming chlorophyte, we have this sword here. Now, this is just a chlorophyte claymore. Then down from that, we have the chlorophyte hammer, which interestingly is also the only hard mode or ammo shown on this sprite sheet, and the only one we got in the actual game. Then in place of a shot bow, we have this recolored adamantite repeater with sights, a chlorophyte partisan, the bar and oars, and here is what you may notice to be the current handgun texture. It is also the gun
that a 5-year-old found in his parents' bedroom, went down and shot his 9-month-old baby brother with it.
I replaced the old handgun texture shown before, just pointing out to any of you Terraria fans. I'm pretty confident that in place of this item we'll get the Venus Magnum. Moving on again, we have this flare, what likely became flower flare. I think with this and the handgun, we can speculate, postulate even, that Plantera or its equivalent was already planned at this point. This spell tone, I imagine this became either the Leaf Blower or Nettle Burst. Then once again further down, we have the Chlorophyte Armor. Interestingly, all the previous armors with various helmet types depict a melee helmet, though this helmet bears a very close resemblance to the Chlorophyte Ranger helmet that we have now. But I imagine that this was just what the melee helmet was supposed to look like at that point. Then following that item there is this, which shares a texture with the Crystal Bullet. Now the coloration and shape make it very close to resemble a pedal. This became the Chlorophyte Bullet, I guess. But now this green crafting table upgrade is very interesting, seeing as we never get an upgrade to the crafting table. There's 2 upgrades to the furnace, 1 for the ammo, but not 1 upgrade for the crafting table. My only real question though is what it would have been needed for, seeing as all the items displayed here would, I imagine, have required an anvil or furnace to make. Maybe originally you were supposed to use a crafting table instead for chlorophyte, because it's all planning. Then we have this pink recolored shadow wall, a direct upgrade to the shadow wall, I guess. And then this potion which doesn't exist. It looks kind of like a combination of the Spelunker and the Titan potion. Now looking at this color, I think it's safe to speculate based on its placement and sun aesthetic that this became the Lizard Temple. Now there is no Lizard Temple sword in the game, though this item does sort of bear a strong resemblance to the True Knight's Edge and Terra Blade. This large drill is the only drill or pickaxe shown after the Drax on the sprite sheet. I think it's safe to assume this became the Pixel, which is also the last actually relevant pickaxe in the game. Repeating a trend of having repeaters, there's no current counterpart to this directly, though this might have became the Stinger. And the grenade launcher is a Plantera drop now, though much like the shotgun and clockwork assault rifle, it might be for a previous tier, but just needed space to be put. It's also possible that it was moved back to being Plantera drop and it distinctly took its place. A purple tome! Now there are 2 magic weapons from Golem now, which are the Boulder Staff and the Ray Gun. Well, this could have been something entirely different, since there's no trace of Golem in these early times. This Horned armor set, which likely became Beetle armor, it definitely looks to be a melee armor and its counterpart in the actual game, so I think that's most likely. Then quite interestingly we have these golden bars and shards, essentially the Beetles. It seems from the colour of most of the previous items here that most of them were crafted from these bars. These shards must have been either chest or philosophy. Based on this purple arrow using the fire arrow texture, I'm guessing that this was a counterpart to the blue fire or water aesthetic of the dungeon. And seeing this area's theme was sun related, it wouldn't surprise me that it would have its own fire tier. This makes me think that the magic tome before was also related to this purple fire. And then there's this chest and key for anyone that was doubting this column is representing some kind of dungeon. Now in 1.1 every chest in Terraria represents a unique loot table, and they were all tiered. They progressed from wood to gold to the lock chest, the shadow chest, and then seemingly the intent was there to be a temple chest. Looking at this key, I can't say whether it was intended to be used to unlock the dungeon, like the current Lizard Temple, or if it was to be used on the chests in the dungeon. And then there's this heart potion. Yeah. Now the color scheme of the items in this column are very similar to the ancient shards obtained from the desert elementals. In it we have of course a standard sword, repeater and spear. This
The Cock 45.
Is the AK-47. A desert wand. Now based on its shape, this could have been a further upgrade form of the magic missile / flame lash / pride dildo. And then there's desert armor. Now it resembles the forbidden armor in coloration, but I think, now this is just conjecture, that based on its visor it may have actually been a ranger armor. So it could be the case that these red tier items didn't have different class helmets, but were rather each class specific, or at least some of them were, which is what I think was most likely the case. And then there's no direct counterpart to these arrows in the game, and quite curiously we have this green heart, which obviously would have become the life root. Now, I assume this was still intended to be found in the jungle, but because of the convention of depicting the mana and healing potions in the first 2 slots here, it is further along than it actually is in progression. And finally we have these pink rocket boots and grappling hook, which fit the aesthetic of the next tier much more than this one. We'll get back to them in a moment. Now this tier is the only one in the entire red group which isn't really so obvious as to the theme, though I have 2 primary guesses as to what it may have been. I think the most likely thing is that this may have been a space or astro tier, and there's a couple things to suggest this. Firstly, this entire red section seems to feature areas not previously that important for progression. The coloration of the items here are quite futuristic and not in line with the outline. The previously shown rocket boots and grappling hook seem to match the aesthetic of this tier quite well, and may have been needed or at the very least useful for traversing this environment, since the space wing shouldn't work. This is in a similar position to where Hell is in late easy mode, and this entire red group is clearly supposed to parallel the late easy mode progression in the same way early hard mode parallels early easy mode progression. There are new bullets shown here, which could have been counterparts to the meteor bullets. The bars share the pattern of Hellstone bars, and there's this gun which looks to be a clockwork assault rifle upgrade, a weapon obtained from defeating Hell's boss. And being space is a vertical inverse of Hell, I think it's the most likely possibility as to what this problem represents. Other than that, I guess it just might have been related to Hell. I remember reading that Reddit at some point was speaking about having additional layers to Hell. This may have been a tier for that, but the coloration design of the items aren't remotely hellish, and I don't know what Aaron had planned here. Then the design of his helmet and his magic tome throws the asteroid theme out a little, which is part of the reason I think it may have instead been a moon tier. Now the light blue highlights on these items are the complementary color orange, and it would fit a pattern of you going from the sun, associated with heat, to the desert, hot, to then the moon, associated with cold, to then the ice, which is cold. Also, this retextured ankle of the wind item has a slightly lunar aesthetic to it, though again, this is just speculation. Either way, I believe this tier was most likely related to space in some capacity. Also, what the hell are these pants? Now this next tier, as I already mentioned, is very apparently to me the Ice Bind. I mean, just glancing at it gives you that impression. This sword became frostbound, this flail and this boomerang look like snowflakes, and this armor just is the frost armor. Interestingly, this tier has no bar or wall, though it does have a grey soul item. As to what soul it was supposed to be, soul of fight, soul of flight, soul of right, soul of plight, soul of trite, I don't know. Also, this Mega Shark upgrade, which I will now proclaim to be called the Megalon, is very cool, and honestly, it's cooler than the SDMG. Though, a massive shout out to all 5 people who have played the game where that's from. And then now we have this little Terrorblade. Now, looking where it's placed, I imagine it was actually supposed to be made out of all these previous swords depicted here. Now, it being a combination of all these biome swords is a lot cooler and also makes a lot more sense. I mean, sun plus moon plus desert plus ice plus jungle giving you the blade of Terraria or Earth makes a lot more sense than just light and darkness. Wouldn't they give you like a chaos sword instead?
You mean the Chaos Emeralds?
And then we have these upgraded versions of the Lightsbane, Muramasa, Blade of Grass, and Fiery Greatsword, Oh, sorry, the volcano now. Guessing these became the true Knight's Edge and Excalibur. Bro, honestly, I think these weapons are a lot cooler.
Goblin. Scouser.
Then finally we have the Cthulhu Slayer Blade. Being that it has a whole tier all on its own, it's safe to say this would tend to be the strongest weapon in the game. While swords were much more useful in Terraria just due to how the bosses used to move around, conventional swords are very bad in Terraria, and there are basically no good ones until 1.4.4. However, due to its absolute insane size, it might have actually been a usable weapon. And honestly, I think it would have been way more badass than the Zeniths, since the Zenith isn't even a melee weapon. It's just a queer little magic sword party. Now, while I do think it is a combination of a bunch of other swords, it doesn't resemble any other weapon in any distinct capacity. Comparatively, the Knight's Edge shares design elements with all its components, so it's possible it wasn't a combination weapon. Now, the ice being planned to be the final tier here is very strange, since this section of the game is supposed to have paralleled easy mode, where you go from the corruption to the dungeon to the jungle. In hell. It would have then made much more sense for you to go to the jungle, to the sun temple, to the desert, to the snow, and then probably to space.
It's so beautiful.
I mean, is this even supposed to be about? I have no idea what this thing's supposed to be. Like, what is this section? It also seems to be a much more direct progression from previously established elements of the game, such as progression from the mini shark to the mega shark, and then to the megalodon here, and also from progression from, say, fire to curse fire to then sunfire, or whatever the hell this was. It's also possible this section of the game was intended to be more free and horizontal like it is currently in late hard mode. The things I don't completely hate horizontal progression, I just think late Terraria has way too much of it for its own good. Because currently going through a heap of bosses with wars like Chlorophyte being practically pointless. I mean, you fight one boss, head back to the dungeon, fight the Frost and Pumpkin Moon, and then go back to the jungle for another dungeon to fight another boss, and then fight another option at some point, and then you can also fight another here, and then fight the Martian invasion, and then there's a solar eclipse again, and then back to the dungeon to kill the Lunar Colossus, and then pillars, and then the final boss. I mean, it's just a complete mess of boss rushing nonsense. Shout out to Elden Ring. It's just my least favorite point in the game. You get so many weapons that are getting immediately replaced. Half the items you get feel completely pointless, unless you're doing some really specific build like spears or explosives only, and it has no resemblance to the kind of simple, straightforward progression the game had originally from 1.0 to 1.1. And there's so many just useless, goofy things like pets and food in Terraria now. Also, is it unusual that I prefer the 1.1 style Terraria graphics shown here over the modern ones?
Come and they'll rape you.
I believe TU did most of the early sprites. She left to go on to become the lead creator of some game called Starbound? I wonder how that turned out. I guess overall to me now the game is just kind of too goofy. Too furry.
I want to have sex with my cat!
Was the
Guna.
Oh my god, young man, kill yourself!
Furry Guna, LGBT.
Shut the fuck up, you faggot!
Coded. Nowadays.
Yeah, stop it, fucking John!
And it's all just a little bit too cringe. So in summary, I think overall, apart from a few unnecessary items, if I used a sprite sheet directly as a blueprint for 1.2, I probably would have actually preferred it to how it really turned out. And in terms of progression, I think it would have made much more sense than what we got. Or maybe I'm just nostalgic about pre-1.2 Terraria. Or maybe you're just queer.